Nobody told Benoit Blanc that going up against a Roman Catholic institution when death is on the line would be this complicated, and that is precisely what makes Wake Up Dead Man a knives-out mystery, one of the most daring entries in Rian Johnson's acclaimed whodunit franchise. The film is a murder mystery wrapped in a confession booth, dressed in vestments, and lit, often, quite literally, by sunlight that the filmmakers seem to believe can travel through every wall and window simultaneously, regardless of the time of day. It is brilliant, maddening, sprawling, and deeply invested in the collision between faith and reason, storytelling and truth. It is also a film that asks you to accept a 40-minute letter as legitimate narrative architecture. And somehow, for the most part, you do. The story opens in the shadow of a New York church, a crumbling, complicated institution that has become the battleground for something far uglier than a theological dispute. Samson, a man whose sobriety and spiritual transformation had become one of the congregation's quiet success stories, is found dead. The circumstances are immediately peculiar. The wound that killed him was inflicted by a small sickle. The scene reads, in the words later delivered by the film's eccentric Southern detective Benoit Blanc, as a textbook example of a perfectly impossible crime, the sort of thing that should belong exclusively to the pages of detective fiction. And yet, here it is, in the flesh. The film's central structural gambit is a letter. Father Judd, the church's earnest and morally conflicted assistant pastor, this congregation being, as one character notes with barely concealed disdain, down to just one priest, now has written an extended account of everything that transpired at Chimney Rock, and in the days surrounding Samson's death. He addresses this account to Blanc. The letter runs somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 minutes of screen time, a decision that is either the bravest piece of storytelling architecture in recent Hollywood memory or an act of breathtaking self-indulgence, depending on how generously you are inclined to feel about it on a given day. What matters is that the letter works. It builds character, plants clues, and weaves in discussions of faith and fantasy and truth and fiction with a deft hand that never becomes preachy, always keeping both plot and theme in motion simultaneously. Monsignor Wicks, referred to by the congregation and by the film's internal shorthand as Wicks, is the story's central antagonist, a man whose religious authority has curdled into something controlling and cruel. Wicks is the kind of ecclesiastical operator who weaponizes his access to spiritual intimacy for psychological leverage, who has driven away congregants and tithes alike through a brand of fire and brimstone pastoral performance that even the most devout of his flock quietly acknowledge does not reflect any theology they would actually endorse. He has built enemies methodically and specifically, and those enemies constitute the film's carefully assembled ensemble of suspects. Jude's letter, true to the spirit of the genre, introduces them one by one. In a moment of metatextual humor that the film earns rather than merely performs, a character observes that the letter reads almost like a syllabus for how to commit the very crime it is meant to document, complete with red herrings, character histories, and enough circumstantial detail to function as both confession and prosecution brief simultaneously. The investigation brings Blanc into the orbit of Geraldine, the local police chief who called him in for his expertise, but who remains stubbornly, sometimes comically, committed to pursuing her original instinct regardless of where the evidence points. Her squad car arrives at every pivotal moment with sirens blazing and lights flashing, a warning signal so reliable that it might as well be part of the crime scene protocol. Geraldine is not incompetent so much as she is a woman who found her suspect on day one and is emotionally unprepared to let him go. Martha is a young girl whose role in the story carries the film's most pointed theological weight. She is the witness, the innocent, the one whose testimony cannot be easily dismissed and whose fate cannot be easily absorbed without consequence. Her presence throughout the investigation carries the particular discomfort of watching a child be instrumentalized by adult systems of power: the church, the law, the family structures built on secrets and shame. When she is invited to witness a ritual she should have been shielded from entirely, the film does not flinch from the implications. It sits with the ugliness long enough for it to mean something. The murder scheme at Chimney Rock, when it is finally unraveled, is elaborate to the point of audacity. It hinged on a devil head costume sewn discreetly onto a garment, a remote-controlled blood mechanism, a knife deployed with precise and lethal skill, and the fortunate coincidence that every person in the room turned their head at exactly the right moment when Martha screamed. It also required the target to collapse in precisely the right direction, the ornamental devil head to neither fall off nor land at an awkward angle when he hit the floor, and Judd to move slowly enough in the aftermath that he would not immediately grab the object embedded in Wix's back, which is, of course, the one thing 90% of people would do, instinctively within 2 seconds of witnessing such an event. The plan worked. It worked because the luck required was, in the film's own words, just as dumb as the people who designed it. And yet, there is a strange satisfaction in watching Johnson commit fully to this level of theatrical absurdity and then frame it, without irony, as a moment of dark catharsis. Blanc, for his part, does not reveal to Judd that he already knows Judd did not kill Samson at the moment, when such a revelation would most spare Judd from unnecessary anguish. He lets the priest walk toward a false confession. Whether this is the cruelty of a detective who requires the full theatrical confession before he will play his hand, or the moral complexity of a man who understands that some reckonings must be reached through one's own free will rather than handed over as a gift, is left deliberately ambiguous. The script is shrewd enough to know that both readings are valid and to decline to adjudicate between them. Glenn Close appears in a role that anchors the film's final act with the specific kind of gravitational weight that only certain careers earn. Her character's desperate negotiation with faith, greed, and legacy reaches its peak in a scene involving a priceless jewel, one of those objects that mystery narratives deploy as the point where human motivation becomes undeniable and the gloss of civilized behavior drops away entirely. Close delivers the material with formidable commitment, though in one pivotal moment, her transformation tips into something so operatic in register that the film briefly loses its footing. It recovers, but for a few seconds, the seams are visible. Throughout all of it, the sunlight in New York behaves in ways that challenge everything previously understood about the Earth's rotation. It shines directly through a church window in one scene for thematic emphasis, then shines directly through the church door in the next scene for the same reason, suggesting a celestial body with a very specific relationship to narrative convenience. The lighting crew also made the choice to leave an organ light and a pulpit light burning in scenes where the overhead lights are already on, a decision that implies either a set designer with a fondness for random illumination or a power bill that the diocese has simply elected to stop monitoring. These are small things. They are also, by the film's final frame, the kinds of things that feel like minor vandalism on a monument, irritating precisely because the monument is worth caring about. What Johnson has built here is a mystery that takes seriously the idea that stories themselves are the weapons and the tools. Judd's letter to Blanc is not just exposition delivered through an unusual frame, it is the argument that the film is making about how narratives are constructed, what details get included, and what those inclusions reveal about the storyteller's own guilt and grief. When Blanc finally says, after 40 minutes of patient listening, what he has been sitting on, the release is enormous. Not because the mystery is particularly airtight, it is not, but because the film has spent so long establishing that the act of telling the story is itself a form of confession, and Blanc's response is the act of hearing one. The film closes on the church congregation, reconvening in the aftermath of everything that has been uncovered, the murder, the conspiracy, the secrets of parentage and financial corruption and spiritual hypocrisy that Wix carried like armor into every confrontation. The building still stands. The congregation, depleted and shaken, still fills the pews. Whether that constitutes a victory for faith or a testament to the particular stubbornness of institutions is exactly the kind of question the film is too honest to answer. Wake Up Dead Man: A Knives Out Mystery is available on Netflix now. What do you think? Does the film's elaborate theatrical murder scheme earn its complexity? Or does the luck required to pull it off undercut the satisfaction of the reveal? And after watching Blanc operate at the intersection of religion and murder for 2+ hours, do you trust him more as a detective or less as a human being? Drop your take in the comments below. And if you want more deep dive breakdowns of the films everyone is talking about, make sure you hit subscribe and leave us a like. There is a lot more coming, and you do not want to miss it.